Christian Horner has already put pen to paper on his new Red Bull contract. Want to find out if the FIA gave the green light? Interested in the insane salary he's about to receive? Then stick around, this video is made for you. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Christian Horner has already crossed the point of no return. The contract with Ferrari isn't pending, provisional, or awaiting final approval. It's fully ratified, legally binding, and quietly reshaping the sport behind the scenes. This isn't an intention or negotiation phase. It's a finalized, executed agreement between one of Formula One's most powerful minds and the most iconic team the grid has ever seen. While fans across the globe still argue, while journalists race to chase unconfirmed whispers, while speculation floods social media in a storm of fake leaks and clickbait, the reality is already cemented in Maranello. The deal has been sealed, the ink no longer wet, and the transformation of both Ferrari and Horner's own legacy has silently begun. Behind a door few even know exists, in a chamber hidden behind reinforced marble and coated locks, Christian Horner signed a document that will trigger one of the most significant paradigm shifts Formula One has ever experienced. The signing took place under a veil of precision and secrecy that would rival intelligence operations. No entourage. No PR handlers. No staged photographs. At exactly 14:17 Central European Time, a black executive vehicle with tinted windows pulled up to a private underground entrance several levels below Ferrari's administrative complex. Horner was accompanied not by Red Bull advisors, nor personal assistants, but by a legal team handpicked by Ferrari's own transitional task force. These were specialists, brought in for one reason: to ensure the contractual handover of power was airtight, irreversible, and immune to last-minute interference. The meeting room was deep inside the building, far from the historic showroom, far from the trophy-lined hallways. Its walls were layered with soundproof insulation. Its lights dimmed. Its air chilled. It was not meant for comfort, it was meant for finality. Horner walked in not as a guest, but as a future commander. There were no smiles. No pleasantries. Just quiet nods between professionals who understood that every word spoken inside those walls would remain forever off the record. The contract was printed on embossed paper with watermark fibers embedded into its surface. Multiple languages. Dozens of clauses. Special provisions for staff migration, discretionary authority, and cross-departmental restructuring. No handshakes until the final page. When it was done, there was no toast. No champagne. No public acknowledgement. Horner exited the building the same way he entered, silent, unseen, untouchable. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. But outside of that vacuum, the world is already beginning to shift. People close to Horner say he has undergone a transformation. His energy has changed. His posture is different. His expression no longer carries the weight of political firefighting, but the calm of a man finally in control again. In private gatherings, he has been unusually open with longtime allies, many of whom are already preparing to join him in Italy. During a discreet dinner on the outskirts of Bologna, Horner was overheard speaking candidly about the internal disintegration at Red Bull. He didn't name names, but his words carried a bitterness honed over years of silent frustration. He spoke of promises broken, trust eroded, and how the job he once loved became a daily war zone of strategic sabotage and backdoor manipulation. At the heart of his discontent remains the ever-growing influence of Jos Verstappen, whose presence has metastasized within Red Bull to the point of complete distortion. Jos, once simply apparent in the paddock, has morphed into an unaccountable agent of disruption. No formal title. No chain of command. But an omnipresent force pushing, pressuring, and twisting the internal flow of information to favor his son at all costs. He has reportedly demanded access to simulator telemetry, interfered in internal strategy calls, and routinely bypassed standard operating procedures by leveraging Max's status as the team's irreplaceable asset. Horner, despite his experience in managing high-pressure dynamics, eventually found himself politically outflanked. As the team celebrated podiums, he endured a slow erosion of his command. Strategic meetings became battlefields. Loyalty became a liability. His voice, once unchallenged, was now one among many, and not always the loudest. The situation became so unmanageable that even trusted lieutenants began questioning the direction of the organization. One engineer described the environment as a championship winning machine with an identity crisis. Another source close to the power unit division claimed internal collaboration had deteriorated, replaced by internal factions jockeying for proximity to either the Verstappen camp or Red Bull's corporate hierarchy. Christian was trapped in a paradox, running a winning team that no longer allowed him to lead. Publicly, he smiled. Privately, he was preparing his exit strategy. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Ferrari, sensing the unrest, had already laid the groundwork months earlier. Contacts were reactivated. Intermediaries were deployed. A dossier was prepared outlining not just Horner's career achievements, but his leadership psychology, his management tendencies, and his capacity to rebuild fractured institutions. What Ferrari didn't want was a figurehead, they wanted a disruptor. Someone capable of tearing down internal silos, realigning priorities, and infusing discipline into a team addicted to tradition but allergic to accountability. Horner fit their criteria perfectly. He wasn't just a proven strategist, he was a survivor, a builder, and most importantly, an agent of order. His arrival won't be ceremonial. It will be immediate, intense, and absolute. Ferrari's internal calendar already reflects shadow appointments. Private onboarding sessions have been scheduled under pseudonyms. Staff relocations have begun. Reluctant department heads are being given ultimatums. Several of Red Bull's mid-tier specialists, particularly from the aero, software, and race strategy sectors, have been quietly approached and are now in advanced talks to follow Horner into his new empire. One source said, he's not switching teams. He's moving his base of operations. In Milton Keynes, the atmosphere is no longer one of denial but damage control. Red Bull's upper executives, blindsided by the speed of Horner's departure, have convened emergency sessions to assess structural risk. Key sponsorship partners are being briefed on the succession plan, but behind closed doors, doubts are rampant. The narrative that Horner was replaceable is quickly unraveling. Vasseur's name has been floated as a potential replacement, but insiders are wary. The cultural gap is enormous. His style contrasts sharply with Red Bull's high-octane environment. And more importantly, Vasseur has been managing his own crisis at Ferrari, one he's now quietly walking away from without answers. Max Verstappen has so far maintained his silence, but those closest to him say he feels destabilized. Despite recent triumphs, the team's psychological center is gone. Jos, flush with short-term influence, may have pushed out the one man who could protect Max from the chaos of unbalanced power. And that vacuum is already attracting opportunists. Within Ferrari, the red carpet is not being rolled out, it's being torn up and replaced with concrete. Horner is coming not to decorate, but to demolish and reconstruct. He's already outlined a radical new operating model, one that compresses decision-making, removes legacy redundancy, and introduces high-pressure data feedback systems modeled after Red Bull's own race war rooms. He wants streamlined authority, direct accountability, and full control over driver development, simulator analytics, and live race decision-making. The board has signed off on every point. This isn't a move. It's a regime change. And once the official announcement detonates across the Formula One landscape, the ramifications will cascade into every corner of the sport, from driver market negotiations to sponsor alignments, to power unit alliances, and even FIA committee influence. What Horner has just done isn't just leap across the paddock. He's redefined what team leadership can mean. And while everyone else is still arguing about whether it's true, the transformation has already begun without them. Inside the ever-volatile paddock of Formula One, where every whisper travels faster than telemetry data and power struggles simmer beneath every podium celebration, a storm has been building behind the polished facade of Red Bull Racing. What once looked like an indestructible alliance between Christian Horner and the Verstappen dynasty has slowly disintegrated into a silent war marked by passive-aggressive encounters, strategic sabotage, and a complete breakdown of mutual respect. The power balance within Red Bull, once tightly held by Horner's meticulous leadership and unwavering command, has tipped dangerously in favor of forces he no longer controls. And at the core of that shift is a man who holds no official title, but whose presence shapes every critical decision, Jos Verstappen. Long dismissed by some as merely an over-involved father and former driver clinging to his son's spotlight, Jos has evolved into something far more complex and disruptive. His access to the inner workings of the team has expanded in the shadows, stretching from hospitality units to engineering briefings, from pit strategy decisions to personnel appointments. His suggestions, once politely ignored, are now treated as directives by some members of the Verstappen-aligned faction within Red Bull. There are even reports of Jos attending simulator sessions uninvited, observing debriefs not intended for outside parties, and calling individual engineers late at night to discuss what he believes should be corrected in the next setup. This interference, once considered manageable, has become intolerable. The infamous clash in Monaco, now a subject of endless retellings in the paddock, was not a spontaneous outburst. It was the culmination of months of veiled tension, subtle provocations, and constant undermining. According to several sources who witnessed the moment, Jos approached Horner just outside the team's energy station and launched into a sharp public rebuke over pit stop sequencing and race strategy. His voice wasn't raised, but his words were laced with contempt. "You're not the one calling the shots anymore. This team belongs to Max now." Horner, standing just feet away from cameras and journalists, said nothing in response. Not because he was shocked, but because he had already made a decision. That confrontation didn't mark the beginning of Horner's unraveling at Red Bull. It was the final confirmation that he no longer had the autonomy to lead. For years, he had operated with relative impunity, a master tactician balancing egos and performance, keeping the team tightly knit through political finesse and a deep understanding of what made champions tick. But the Verstappen era had gradually morphed into something else entirely. Horner was no longer navigating a team. He was trapped inside a power structure built around one driver and his inner circle, a structure that treated feedback as criticism and authority as intrusion. Red Bull's engineering room became increasingly divided. On one side, those still loyal to Horner's long-term vision, and on the other, those orbiting around Max, influenced directly or indirectly by Jos's growing voice. There was more happening in the background than anyone publicly acknowledged. Technical personnel began quietly resigning or requesting transfers. Internal memos were ignored. Meetings were rescheduled without Horner's input. Decisions were being finalized before they reached his desk. It was death by 1,000 cuts, and Horner, despite his outward composure, felt the noose tightening with every race. His instincts, sharpened over decades in the sport, told him what many around him were too afraid to admit. His position, though still official, had become symbolic. And in Formula One, symbolism means weakness. While outwardly still managing logistics and attending press conferences, Horner had begun searching for a way out. Not just an escape from Red Bull, but an opportunity that would allow him to prove, beyond all doubt, that his success wasn't dependent on one car, one driver, or one dominant era. That opportunity came from the very team that once represented his fiercest rival, Scuderia Ferrari. The idea had first been floated casually over a dinner in Geneva with one of Ferrari's board members, disguised as a conversation about sport and leadership. But within weeks, the conversation turned serious. What Horner was being offered wasn't a role, it was a resurrection. A mandate to tear down the bureaucratic fog that had paralyzed Ferrari for years and rebuild the team in his own image, free from the political rot that had swallowed so many before him. Ferrari promised total autonomy over staff selection, the freedom to restructure departments without consulting Maranello's corporate labyrinth, and a direct line to the board. They also assured Horner that he would be the face of the team, not just operationally, but culturally. They didn't want a manager. They wanted a figurehead, a general, a reformer. And more importantly, they wanted someone who could stare down chaos and emerge victorious. The alignment was too perfect to ignore. For Horner, it was the challenge he had been waiting for, a final act in his career that would silence every critic and reset the balance of power in Formula One. So why the delay? Why the silence from Maranello? Because despite all the wheels in motion, the man who still officially holds the title of team principal at Ferrari is not yet gone. Frederic Vasseur, although increasingly isolated and internally contested, still has contractual protections. And some within Ferrari's inner circle still see him as a stabilizing figure, one whose departure must be handled with delicacy to avoid public embarrassment. The severance negotiations have become unusually complex. Sources close to the matter say that Vasseur is demanding not just financial compensation, but reputational safeguards, clauses that would prevent Ferrari from announcing Horner in a way that paints the Frenchman as a failure. Lawyers are combing through every possible legal vulnerability, drafting language to prevent leaks about strategic changes Horner intends to implement once installed. There's even talk of a soft transition period, during which Vasseur will remain on the payroll but be effectively sidelined. Meanwhile, Ferrari's marketing and PR departments are preparing something unprecedented. A multi-stage media rollout is being developed, involving exclusive interviews, a cinematic trailer-style reveal, and branded content spanning from legacy clips of Schumacher's golden years to a dramatic voiceover teasing the new era of the prancing horse. The plan is to time the entire campaign with Ferrari's monumental 1000th Grand Prix appearance, an emotional historic event that will take place at Monza, Italy's motorsport cathedral, the spiritual home of tifosi passion, the perfect stage for a redemption story of mythic proportions. In the coming months, the whispers will grow louder. The denials will continue. Both Red Bull and Ferrari will publicly claim business as usual. But behind the garage doors, behind the frost-covered paddock smiles, two empires are preparing for tectonic change. One is about to lose its architect. The other is preparing to crown a new king. When the dust finally settles, the only certainty is this: Formula One will not be the same again. And Christian Horner, for better or worse, will be right at the center of its next great transformation. In a moment so secretive, so deliberately hidden from the world's eyes, that not even the most well-connected journalists had the slightest inkling, a meeting took place that could redefine the very course of Formula One history. Deep within the Italian countryside, far removed from the bustling circuits and away from the polished chaos of the paddock, an unmarked test facility just outside Bologna became the stage for what could only be described as a clandestine convergence of two of the sport's most iconic figures. The air was thick with the scent of gasoline and silence, with only the occasional murmur of equipment being adjusted behind closed garage doors. There were no team uniforms, no PR representatives, no digital media teams capturing the moment for fans. Just two folding chairs beneath a white canvas canopy, set up on cracked asphalt beside a temporary garage, barely distinguishable from the empty pit lane beyond it. Lewis Hamilton arrived first, dressed in plain, neutral tones, completely unbranded, accompanied only by a single personal assistant who vanished after ensuring the location was secure. A short while later, Christian Horner entered from the opposite direction, stepping out of a blacked-out vehicle with tinted windows and no markings. He walked slowly, alone, expression unreadable. No words were spoken at first. No handshakes. Just a long silent pause as the two men sat opposite each other, years of rivalry and mutual calculation coiled tightly between them. What followed, according to a Ferrari source so highly placed they referred to internally only by a code name, was not a conversation, it was a revelation. Horner broke the silence. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried weight. It was not the voice of the fiery Red Bull team boss who'd sparred with Mercedes in the media for over a decade. It was something more personal, something laced with clarity, intent, and something dangerously close to vulnerability. "I've been waiting for this moment longer than you can imagine," he began, eyes never leaving Hamilton's. "You were always the foundation. Even before I left Red Bull, I knew, if I ever stepped into a project like this, it had to start with you. You weren't a backup plan. You weren't an option. You were always the first line in my blueprint." Hamilton studied him for several seconds, not blinking, not smiling. He crossed his arms, leaned slightly forward, and spoke with the calm of someone who has spent years being promised the world. "So you really walked away from Red Bull, for this?" And that was the moment Horner's demeanor shifted from thoughtful to unwavering. He leaned in, not to persuade, but to affirm. "I didn't leave Red Bull because I was finished winning. I left because I saw a ceiling there, one that had nothing to do with performance. Politics. Interference. A structure that was beginning to limit vision instead of unleashing it. Ferrari is different. Not because it's easy, but because it's unfinished. It's raw. It's chaotic. But it's powerful. And I believe, with you at the center, we can unlock something no one's expecting. This isn't nostalgia. This isn't a comeback story. This is about building something no one's ever dared to build before. And it starts with your car." What came next wasn't hyperbole. It was engineering. Horner laid out precise changes already in motion: new chassis torsion dynamics, recalibrated steering response ratios, a dramatically altered center of pressure intended to replicate the signature feel of Hamilton's preferred driving flow. He described downforce redistribution across a narrowed rear wing concept, something not yet shown to the rest of the technical team. "We've modeled your entire telemetry arc from 2019 through 2021, Horner said. "Every input, every micro-adjustment, every outlier. We're not guessing. We're replicating the rhythm you drive with, not just the results." Hamilton, listening carefully, tilted his head slightly, then asked the inevitable, "And Charles? Where does he fit in all this?" There was no pause. Horner's answer was swift, decisive, and unapologetic. This isn't about balancing two projects. This is about anchoring one future. Your car gets the new spec first. Charles will remain on the current development path. He'll receive upgrades later, after they've passed your scrutiny. This isn't equality. This is alignment. You're the reference, the baseline, the final authority. Everything else flows from there. Hamilton didn't respond immediately. He looked out across the test facility, where a single car sat under cover, its bodywork invisible, but its silhouette unmistakably aggressive. "You're asking me to lead a revolution," he finally said. "No," Horner replied. "I'm asking you to be the revolution." What wasn't mentioned but hung heavily in the air were the consequences. The pressure from Tifosi, expecting immediate success. The political backlash inside Ferrari's old guard, many of whom have already begun grumbling in hushed tones about Horner's radical overhauls. The reaction from Red Bull's hierarchy, still stunned by Horner's departure and even more alarmed by rumors that he's poaching key engineers. And then there's the Verstappen camp, deeply unsettled by Horner's exit and the vacuum of loyalty it leaves behind. Everyone knows that if Hamilton accepts this role, not just as driver, but as Ferrari's axis, it sets off a chain reaction that reshapes everything: driver dynamics, power structures, even the future of the sport's technical arms race. What adds even more gravity is what's happening behind the scenes. Horner has already ordered the complete restructuring of Ferrari's simulator team, bringing in external consultants from aerospace and defense backgrounds. He sanctioned the development of a proprietary AI-assisted telemetry translator, one that can mirror Hamilton's inputs in predictive simulation for future chassis development. These aren't tweaks. These are declarations of intent. And all of it is being funded under a discretionary budget clause Ferrari had quietly reactivated months before Horner officially arrived, almost as if someone knew this moment was coming. The canopy tent was dismantled later that evening. The chairs were taken down. The covered car was loaded onto an enclosed trailer with no markings. The garage was locked, lights shut off. The facility returned to its normal, unassuming state. But in the minds of those few who witnessed even fragments of the day's events, the shift was unmistakable. The conversation didn't end there. It simply moved underground, into encrypted servers, private briefings, whispered hotel meetings across Europe. What was once speculation is now mission architecture. And Hamilton, a man who has spent years dancing at the edge of legacy and evolution, may finally be ready to dive headfirst into both. Because if he says yes, if he commits fully to what Horner is offering, it won't just change Ferrari. It won't just alter the balance of Formula One. It will set in motion the most aggressive reinvention of a team, a driver, and a philosophy the sport has seen in decades. And when that happens, the silence of Bologna will echo louder than any engine ever could. The internal structure of Ferrari is straining under unprecedented pressure as the consequences of a top-secret breakthrough ripple violently through the heart of the team. What began as a highly classified technical advancement has spiraled into a full-blown political storm within the Scuderia, and the emotional shockwaves are no longer containable. At the epicenter of this eruption is Charles Leclerc, a driver who has invested not just years of competition, but his identity, ambition, and loyalty into the hope of bringing Ferrari back to glory. That hope now feels weaponized against him. According to multiple insiders, the Monegasque was deliberately kept out of the loop regarding the development of Ferrari's newest aerodynamic overhaul. He wasn't consulted, wasn't asked to contribute driving data, and most painfully of all, wasn't even informed that the upgrade would be deployed during a pivotal private test session. He discovered the existence of the new componentry only after the test had concluded, an omission that has deeply shaken his trust in the team's leadership. Those close to Leclerc say he initially believed the silence was an oversight. But the truth soon became unavoidable. This was intentional. What followed was a confrontation that left Ferrari's senior engineering team stunned. In a normally routine internal meeting at the factory, attended by design staff, aerodynamics leads, and race operations heads, Leclerc entered the room with a presence that was impossible to ignore. Not angry in the traditional sense, but simmering, laser-focused, coiled with intensity. When discussion turned to the test results from the newly trialed aero package, he interjected sharply. Fixing his gaze on one of the technical directors, he asked with calm venom, "Is that where we are now? Developing innovations around one driver and hiding them from the other?" Not a soul answered. It wasn't just the words, it was the realization that one of Ferrari's foundational pillars had just been pushed to the margins. What makes the situation even more volatile is the nature of the breakthrough itself. This is not a minor update or an iterative step forward. This is a radical leap, a concept born not within traditional motorsport circles, but resurrected from the ashes of a classified aerospace initiative that never saw the light of day. Ferrari, through a complex web of offshore entities and undisclosed transactions, quietly obtained the research materials from a now-defunct military-grade flight systems firm. The intellectual property was disguised as wind tunnel modeling assets in internal documents, but the reality was far more groundbreaking. What they acquired were highly experimental schematics designed to control airflow over moving surfaces with a degree of precision that borders on science fiction. Working with a hand-picked group of engineers, some former aviation specialists who now operate under strict NDAs, Ferrari's technical division re-engineered the concept for racing application. At the heart of the new system are internally embedded micro-actuators that manipulate underbody air behavior dynamically during real-time track conditions. Unlike static aero solutions that are baked into the car's bodywork, these systems react to grip variation, yaw changes, and directional load transfer, giving the car unmatched mid-corner stability and off-throttle predictability. The FIA has no explicit ban on such systems, primarily because the technology was never anticipated in regulatory design. It's not invisible, but it is effectively ungoverned. Even more contentious is the revelation that the entire system was mapped using only Hamilton's telemetry as the behavioral model. Not just surface-level throttle traces or brake pressure plots, but deep behavioral modeling, inputs under stress, reaction time to rear slip, how he modulates torque during micro-corrections. The algorithm that determines the response of the aero system is quite literally designed to react as Hamilton would. No other driver, including Leclerc, had any input into the calibration of this machinery. The car, in its current trajectory, is being hardwired to think like Lewis. Internally, this strategy is causing chaos. Leclerc's race engineer, usually a steady presence in Charles's decision-making loop, has reportedly been reassigned to a more generalized performance role. New personnel, many with previous ties to Brackley and Milton Keynes, have arrived without formal public announcement and now occupy key technical positions. The garage itself has begun to shift in tone, where once there was balance, there is now unmistakable prioritization. Mechanics once split evenly between driver teams are now spending increased hours on car number 44 setup bay, often staying late to run simulations long after Leclerc's side of the garage has gone dark. Charles, for his part, is no longer masking his disappointment. He's gone from puzzled to frustrated to alienated, and is now moving with strategic caution. His personal manager has expanded their reach, initiating contact with key stakeholders at rival teams, most notably a German outfit preparing for a leadership overhaul and a powertrain reset. One high-level executive at that team confirmed informal discussions have begun regarding Leclerc's availability for 2026 and beyond. It's not an active negotiation yet, but it's much more than idle curiosity. It's the laying of groundwork, just in case. Christian Horner, aware of the internal fracture, is unshaken. He has made it clear to Ferrari's board that this strategy is not a compromise, but a pivot. One centered on clarity, conviction, and performance-first ideology. His view is simple: when you bring in a driver with 7 world championships, you don't pair him, you unleash him. The team must adapt to him, not vice versa. He has already instructed senior staff to ignore the noise and remain focused on the data. If the lap times fall, if the simulations improve, if the car delivers wins, then the narrative writes itself. Discontent, in Horner's world, is temporary. Victory is permanent. What's emerging now is not just a technical coup, it's a cultural metamorphosis. Ferrari, long defined by passion, heritage, and shared identity, is being remade into something colder, sharper, more efficient. The romanticism is being stripped away, replaced with a results-driven machinery that tolerates no ambiguity. For some, this is sacrilege. For others, it's evolution. But for Leclerc, it may mean the end of a dream he's held since he first wore red. And as the paddock watches this transformation unfold in real time, one truth is becoming increasingly impossible to ignore: this isn't just a shift in leadership. It's a power play of historic proportions. And its consequences could alter the DNA of Ferrari forever. Inside the intricate and volatile world of Formula One, where every gesture is measured and every whisper can ignite a firestorm, the atmosphere surrounding the recent developments is electric with tension, strategy, and unspoken consequences. Toto Wolff, the methodical and usually composed architect behind Mercedes' decade-long dominance, is described by insiders as uncharacteristically furious. The calm exterior he projects during press conferences has reportedly been replaced, at least behind closed doors, by a simmering frustration that is rapidly nearing a boiling point. The catalyst, Christian Horner, long regarded as Red Bull's immovable figurehead, not only walked away from the empire he helped build but executed one of the most dramatic and comprehensive switches of allegiance in recent F1 history, locking in a strategic partnership with Ferrari that stretches far beyond the racetrack. For months, it had been quietly assumed among top paddock figures that Mercedes had the upper hand in exploratory discussions with Horner. Early meetings were conducted in absolute secrecy, taking place in neutral European cities and behind heavily secured doors, with the objective of integrating Horner into a future Mercedes structure that was beginning to look more unstable with every passing season. The departure of key technical minds, the fading dominance on track, and Lewis Hamilton's growing sense of restlessness had forced Wolff to consider the unthinkable, sharing control, even with a longtime rival. But just as progress was being made, Ferrari entered the picture with a proposal so all-encompassing and forward-thinking that it redefined what a team principal's role could be. The offer wasn't limited to oversight of Ferrari's Formula One operation, though that alone would be a prize most would take without hesitation. It included sweeping authority across multiple arms of the prancing horse's empire, granting Horner advisory input into the development of their next-generation hypercars, influence in their forthcoming electric performance lineup, and even a confidential seat at internal design briefings for concept vehicles that may not hit the market for years. Horner, who has long been regarded as a master of team politics and strategic foresight, saw this not just as a career move, but as an opportunity to transcend his previous identity entirely. He would no longer be defined by Red Bull's glory, he would become synonymous with Ferrari's renaissance. The backlash from Mercedes has been immediate and severe. Sources within Stuttgart suggest that Wolff feels personally betrayed, not just because of the lost opportunity, but because of how silently and ruthlessly it unfolded. While Mercedes was offering a collaborative pathway, Ferrari handed Horner the keys to the kingdom. The timing couldn't have been worse. Lewis Hamilton, now publicly intrigued by Horner's new empire and privately praising the vision being executed in Maranello, is drifting further away from the leadership he once followed with unwavering loyalty. Several individuals close to Hamilton confirm that he sees in Horner a kind of clarity and long-term purpose that Mercedes has struggled to project in recent years. It's not just admiration, it's alignment. Even more unsettling for the Mercedes hierarchy is the growing influence Horner now wields over key talent and infrastructure. 3 senior-level engineers, each holding critical knowledge of Red Bull's aerodynamic, power unit integration, and simulator calibration departments, suddenly resigned without fanfare. Their departures, first chalked up to burnout or personal reasons, are now viewed through a very different lens. All 3 were seen boarding a chartered jet under discreet circumstances, destination unknown at first, but later confirmed to be northern Italy. These defections have triggered a flurry of internal investigations at Red Bull, with legal advisors scouring every document, looking for breaches, loopholes, or any evidence of tampering. But it appears Ferrari was meticulous. No corners cut. Just massive buyouts, rumored to be nearly double market rates, and contracts designed to keep everything strictly above board. Red Bull, which has never been shy about airing its confidence and provocations publicly, has gone almost entirely silent. Helmut Marko, who typically has a quote ready for every occasion, has reportedly declined all media inquiries and cancelled his attendance at upcoming public events. No damage control. No clarifications. Just withdrawal. Verstappen's usually hyperactive digital presence has also shifted. Gone are the celebratory photos, the behind-the-scenes race day snapshots, and the cryptic next chapter loading captions. Instead, his feed is filled with innocuous training clips, casual lifestyle content, and reposts of sponsor material, none of which suggests stability or enthusiasm. People close to his camp describe the mood as under strategic review. Whispers now swirl that more Red Bull personnel, specifically from the data analytics and race operations departments, have already been approached by Ferrari's recruitment intermediaries. Confidentiality agreements prevent public acknowledgement, but movement is happening. Hotel bookings in Turin have spiked for a handful of familiar Red Bull surnames. Car rentals registered to known performance engineers were traced near Ferrari's Maranello compound. It's a slow-motion extraction, but one with surgical precision. And while Red Bull is scrambling to stem the flow, insiders admit the morale within Milton Keynes is teetering. Wolff, meanwhile, is attempting to recover lost ground by accelerating internal restructuring efforts. Names that were once seen as too green for upper management are being considered for promotions. Mercedes is reportedly in discussions with former technical directors from rival teams in an attempt to rebuild not just the talent pipeline, but the narrative of dominance they once controlled. There's also chatter about deepening their partnership with Ineos and leveraging the chemical giant's R&D capabilities to create a hybrid performance lab that would stretch beyond Formula One, a desperate but potentially visionary attempt to out-innovate a resurgent Ferrari. Behind the scenes, a new Cold War is beginning to take shape. Not just among teams, but between ideologies, old-school dynasties versus adaptive superstructures, stable powerhouses versus agile disruptors. Horner has positioned himself not just as a defector, but as a creator of something unprecedented. Ferrari's silence in all this isn't weakness, it's part of a strategy to speak only with results. And as this new chapter unfolds, no one knows exactly where the fault lines will settle, or which teams will emerge intact once the dust clears. But one truth is becoming undeniable. What began as a simple rumor has exploded into a calculated power shift that is already rewriting the future of Formula One. And Toto Wolff, for all his experience and tactical prowess, is no longer holding the pen. In the hidden corridors of Formula One, beyond the spotlight of the media and the sanitized soundbites offered in press conferences, something far more significant than a driver rumor or a chassis update is unfolding. A transformation is taking shape, one so deep, so intricately planned, and so volatile in consequence that it threatens to redraw the lines of power, prestige, and performance across the entire grid. The movement is invisible to the untrained eye, but every insider with any level of proximity to the sport can feel it, an electric tension crackling beneath the surface. This is not noise. This is not hype. It's the orchestrated silence before a nuclear-level shift detonates across the paddock. Things aren't just shifting behind the scenes. They're collapsing and rebuilding in real time. Old alliances are being burned. Strategic blueprints are being shredded and rewritten. Power is no longer where it once was. Senior engineers are making quiet phone calls late at night. Junior staff are suddenly asking HR departments about release clauses. Team members who were once loyal to the death are now discreetly brushing up their CVs. And at the center of it all is a figure who has become synonymous with competitive dominance, political agility, and championship pedigree, Christian Horner. The same man who steered Red Bull through its most glittering chapters has already crossed the point of no return. There is no speculation left. There is no negotiation pending. The deal is done. The contract is binding. Christian Horner has signed with Ferrari. Yes, that Ferrari. The team steeped in tradition, paralyzed for years by internal politics and cursed by near misses, has finally made a decision so bold, so unprecedented, that it's difficult to overstate its implications. This isn't a hiring. This is a coup. This is a declaration to the rest of the sport that Ferrari is no longer chasing hope. Ferrari is building an empire. And in their minds, there was only one person capable of turning vision into victory, and they've secured him. The effect of this move is already causing deep fractures. At Red Bull Racing, uncertainty is no longer theoretical, it's operational. Strategic cohesion is slipping. Senior leaders are being forced to step into unfamiliar roles to contain panic. Internal discussions that once revolved around how to extend dominance now focus on damage control. The ghost of stability is vanishing, replaced by hard questions. Who takes over? Who follows Horner to Italy? Who can keep the culture intact when its architect walks out? The consequences aren't limited to staff attrition or lost know-how. They reach into the soul of the team itself. Without Horner, Red Bull becomes a different organism. Whether that organism survives or thrives is now an open question. Meanwhile, Ferrari isn't just preparing a workspace, they're constructing a fortress. Renovations are being fast-tracked inside the Gestione Sportiva. New offices are being set up not just for Horner, but for the wave of loyalists expected to follow him. Confidential internal documents are being rewritten. The technical chain of command is being reconstructed. Data access is being restricted, reclassified, and compartmentalized. Ferrari knows exactly what it has in its hands. Not just a leader, but a living blueprint for consistent dominance. And they're not wasting a second preparing to execute the vision. And the ripple effects don't stop with teams, they've reached the drivers too. Carlos Sainz, whose future at Ferrari already felt shaky, now finds himself in a state of limbo so complex that even his management seems unsure how to proceed. New leadership brings new preferences, new philosophies. Sainz may be a proven race winner, but will he fit into Horner's ideal configuration? Or is his seat already being earmarked for another rising star, or perhaps an old ally of Horner's from his Red Bull years? Then there's Leclerc, once seen as the centerpiece of Ferrari's next generation. His reaction, though not public, has been quietly seismic. Insiders say he was neither informed early nor consulted. His trust, already worn thin by years of strategic blunders and championship heartbreaks, is crumbling. He's still under contract, yes. But the possibility of an early exit clause being triggered is not off the table. If Leclerc feels boxed out of the team's new future, don't be surprised if rival teams begin circling like vultures. He has the speed, the talent, and now perhaps, the motivation to walk. Lewis Hamilton, too, will feel this shift. His move to Ferrari, already monumental, now gains a different color entirely. What began as a final career statement may now transform into a championship assault. Hamilton and Horner, once rivals, now potential allies. Imagine the psychological advantage that combination brings. Horner knows how to manage big personalities. Hamilton knows how to win under pressure. Together, under Ferrari Red, they could become the most dangerous pairing on the grid, not just in terms of performance, but in narrative dominance, brand power, and strategic depth. Elsewhere in the paddock, teams are reeling. Aston Martin's leadership has been scrambling to understand the implications. McLaren is now wondering whether the gains they've made in the last year will hold up under this tidal wave of change. Alpine, already fractured, risks falling further behind in the wake of this superpower consolidation. Even Mercedes, usually measured and deliberate, is showing signs of anxiety. They may have lost Hamilton, but now they risk losing the psychological upper hand they once wielded with such ease. The calls for restructuring are no longer whispers, they're turning into demands. The governing body, the FIA, has also taken notice. The magnitude of the move is such that it could influence future regulatory decisions, resource allocation dynamics, and even political alliances within the sport. Whenever power centralizes, especially in a team like Ferrari, new balances must be struck. F1's political engine is already revving in anticipation of the fallout. And still, the public waits. There has been no official press release, no confirmation from Ferrari, no word from Red Bull. But the silence is louder than any statement. Everyone knows something colossal is coming, and the delay in communication only builds anticipation to an unbearable pitch. When the announcement finally comes, when the video drops, the quotes hit social media, and the press conferences begin, Formula One will not simply react. It will redefine itself. Because this is not about Christian Horner changing teams. It's about a man rewriting the future of a team that has long been trapped by its past. It's about a sport entering a new phase of intensity, unpredictability, and psychological warfare. When the dust settles, when the words are finally spoken out loud, Formula One will be staring at a brand new map, one where the old landmarks no longer apply, and the road ahead belongs only to those bold enough to take it.